Chapter 946, Life is like a game of chess. Just as Lu Shu was about to lead the Wei Wu army to follow the Black Feather army, there was a turn of events. Zhang Weiyu bid farewell to Lu Shu. Lu Shu was stunned. "Why are you leaving all of a sudden?" "We are not leaving." Zhang Weiyu shook his head. "We are just returning to the Qinglu Mountain to wait for you." At this moment, Lu Shu saw the tired expression on the faces of Zhang Weiyu and the rest. It suddenly struck him that Zhang Weiyu and the rest were ordinary humans and they could not stand the torment from the long journey. Although Lu Shu had snatched powerful horses for Zhang Weiyu and the rest and settled them down before any battles so they would not be exhausted, for Zhang Weiyu and the rest, it was extremely exhausting to make the long journeys. Therefore, Zhang Weiyu and the rest had no choice but to leave so that they would not drag the rest of the army down. Lu Shu thought about it and said, "Should I find a carriage for you guys? It would be less tiring that way and you guys won't need to go through the bumpy road on horseback." However, Zhang Weiyu shook his head and gave off a hint of arrogance. "We are not so weak that we have to be carried around. That will not happen unless we are severely injured. You do not need to bother about us, we will head back to the Qinglu Mountain by ourselves. If you ever return, we will meet at the Qinglu Mountain. If you don't return after heading to the west region, we will return to town after the battle ends." Lu Shu kept silent for a while. He knew that Zhang Weiyu and the rest had their own style and charisma. Initially, Lu Shu wanted to make use of Zhang Weiyu and the rest to help him with the instruction of battle tactics and training the soldiers. Nevertheless, they began to develop a relationship after the interactions. Lu Shu was not a cold-blooded creature. At this moment, Zhang Weiyu smiled. "All good things must come to an end. We have done enough for the Wei Wu army. As long as they followed our instructions, I believe that they will undergo another round of breakthrough within 6 months' time." Lu Shu fell silent. He knew that Zhang Weiyu and the rest were fixed on leaving. Actually, he did not understand them. They stayed in the town for a ridiculous reason. As they were unable to fight, they wanted to make use of the Wei Wu army to reminisce about the times when they were active. This group of individuals had an ideal and emotion which Lu Shu could not understand. Lu Shu felt that he had the same ideals when he became the 9th Heavenly King. Lu Shu asked Zhang Weiyu the question for the 3rd time, "Is it worth it?" However, before Zhang Weiyu could reply, Lu Shu continued, "For a promise of little significance? For a recompensation due to guilt? Will you guys be happy in town? Are you guys willing to be an insignificant pawn and sacrifice the meaning of your life on someone else's chessboard? What if you can't wait for that day to arrive?" Zhang Weiyu suddenly laughed after a long pause. "Everyone is a pawn in this world." Lu Shu shook his head. "If I am regarded as a chess piece, I will definitely kill the chess player. In the future, perhaps you will regret it when you recall about how you have wasted your life." At this moment, Zhang Weiyu and Dong Yi laughed as they exchanged gazes. They headed towards the Qinglu Mountain on the backs of their strong black horses. Zhang Weiyu smiled and said, "Life is like a game of chess, once you make your move, you cannot regret it." A line of 56 individuals charged furiously on their horses. Zhang Weiyu suddenly felt that he returned to the past when they were formidable too. He suddenly pulled the reins and turned to look at the direction where the Wei Wu army headed to. The Wei Wu army is considered to be successful. If they are able to rise to rank 2 in 6 months' time, they could go anywhere in the world. However, it would take too long for them to rise to rank 1, sighed Dong Yi. They lack the heritage of the Imperial Dragon soldiers. The heritage that Dong Yi was referring to was the number of rank 1 experts. It was easy to rise to rank 2 but difficult to rise to rank 1. In order to rise to rank 1 from rank 2, one needed more than resources and skills. Aptitude and self-realization was also required. The Imperial Dragon soldiers was able to be undefeatable as there were no undefeatable formations by the 300 Imperial Palace soldiers. The sharpest long spear was in the hand of the King of Gods. What a pity, someone laughed suddenly. I did not expect to bid farewell so soon. I actually like the foolish guy. The way they fought reminded me of us in the past. I can't bear to leave too, another person continued. Zhang Weiyu frowned, he felt the same too. However, they could not continue to fight alongside the Weiwu army. At this moment, they suddenly heard rough footsteps from the direction where the Weiwu army headed to. The 56 of them, including Zhang Weiyu, stood on the spot and looked at each other. Suddenly, Li Haitan's voice was heard from afar. Zhang Weiyu, wait for us, we will return to the Qinglu mountain together. Zhang Weiyu looked at Lu Shu in confusion. Do you know what are the consequences of returning to the Qinglu mountain together with us? Lu Shu said, surrounded by the army of the aristocrats? We can't do anything if the Black Feather army entered the mountain anyway. Zhang Weiyu suddenly said after a long pause. Then, do you know what are the consequences if some people realize that you are following us? It can be easily dealt with if we are alone in the Weiwu army. If someone realizes that the 56 of us are together. To be honest, Lu Shu did not want to get involved with Zhang Weiyu and the rest initially. However, if they returned to Qinglu Mountain alone, what should they do if the army of the aristocrats really went over? The most important issue was not that. Lu Shu looked at Zhang Weiyu calmly and said, did you guys bring food? Zhang Weiyu was speechless. We have finished transporting all the food supplies from the Qinglu Mountain. If you guys don't bring food, are you planning to eat grass? Asked Lu Shu. From Zhang Weiyu's distress, plus 666. Lu Shu smiled joyfully. If we get discovered, we can escape together. It's not like we haven't done that before, rest assured. As Lu Shu said that, he turned around and shouted at the Weiwu army behind him, let's go home. Li Liang, the commander of the Black Feather army, had made use of the magical instrument to reconnect himself with his schoolmate in the palace. He wanted to earn some retirement funds with the Weiwu army, but the Weiwu army did not appear in the end. Zhao Shuai, the chief officer of the Song gambling den, wanted to start another bet with Lu Shu, but realized that the Weiwu army suddenly returned to the Qinglu Mountain and seemed to have turned into commoners overnight. The battle ended without any signs. The celebration in the palace ended with the profits made by the gambling dens. Lu Shu also got his manor in the palace. Chapter 947, To Escape or Not. Lu Shu looked at the way the soldiers of the Weiwu army learned how to read with a melancholic expression and asked Zhang Weiyu, the aristocrats are too good at enduring, we did so many disgusting things to them and they haven't attacked the Qinglu Mountain yet? Although it was rather stressful if tens of thousands of soldiers from the army of the aristocrats entered the mountain, Lu Shu felt rather lonely without any income. Since Lu Shu was young, he understood that one should definitely not sit and do nothing. Zhang Weiyu was also rather confused. This doesn't make sense. Lu Yizhao kept saying that the army of the aristocrats had stayed in the Weibei Pass when he returned. They were not worried about recovering the 3 fortresses that they had lost. Could it be that the Lord of Heaven had completed his training? Lu Shu said suddenly, if the Lord of Heaven completed his training, shouldn't they recover the fortresses immediately? I think that it is unlikely, so I am guessing that. Could they be afraid of me? Lu Xiaoyu nodded suddenly. If they are fighting against the Weiwu army, if they are lucky, they just had to change several soldiers. If they are unlucky, they have to change to aristocrats. Lu Shu looked at Lu Xiaoyu in an appraising manner. Lu Xiaoyu, you made a good conclusion. Lu Xiaoyu smiled. Of course. Zhang Weiyu looked at this scene emotionlessly and did not have the intention to conduct any further analysis. From Zhang Weiyu's distress points, plus 199. In fact, the aristocrats were fearful of Lu Shu's identity. In the beginning, they thought that Lu Shu was just a gifted young man without any real talent. In the Luniverse, were there not enough gifted talents who died in the end? However, news came from the palace and they admitted that Lu Shu belonged to the Lu family in the Luli Lane. What the Lu family said was very vague, neither did they say that he was the relative nor the direct descendant. This confused everyone. After several decades, an extremely gifted individual would come from the Lu family of the Luli Lane. However, this was not the main point. Everyone knew that the Lu family of the Luli Lane was very humble. They did not conduct much business with people outside of the palace. Although those businesses were very important, they were also not the main point. The specific reason was rarely mentioned by the older generation. Meanwhile, although the younger generation did not know why the Lu family was so powerful, they knew that they could not be messed around with. At this moment, many of the young people of the palace were indignant. Are we just going to be bullied by him and not fight back? Is the army of the aristocrats of the North region so timid? The geniuses of the palace could not tolerate this humiliation. However, the adults in the family said expressionlessly, the army of the four regions dare not to mess around with the Lu family. The palace did not mind. You can choose what to do based on the situation. Upon seeing the attitude of the adults, the geniuses felt happy. This meant that although the Lu family of the Luli Lane was powerful, with their own position in the palace, they were not afraid. Therefore, after the Lu family of the Luli Lane spoke, everyone seemed to have found the explanation to the rise of the Weiwu army. However, the teenagers of the palace were still clenching their fists and some of them started to plan for a secret trip to the North region. The people who planned to head to the North region were those who had suffered great losses in the gambling den. They had nothing to do and were rather talented. Normally, they were spoiled brats in the palace and could not endure the humiliation after being fooled around with. A group of 12 geniuses from the palace had already discussed their plan. When the school holidays came, they would tell their parents before leaving the palace. Suddenly, someone commented, there is a course called Traveling 1,000 Miles this term break. It is a perfect chance for us to go to the North region. Let's fix it as such. One of the geniuses placed his foot on the stool and sneered, let us show the brat what serious consequences he would suffer from plotting a scheme like this. I have King promised Lin Yi from the Red Jade House that I would go over to support her this month. Now, I don't have any money. Hence, they confirmed the plan of heading to the North region 2 months later. Lu Shu did not know about it. If he had known, he would welcome them to hurry over. He was there to do the group of geniuses justice. Wasn't he troubled over the fact that there was no progression? While Lu Shu was feeling troubled, Li Haitan and the rest felt troubled too. They had to learn how to read and write, as well as do homework, after they returned to the mountain. To be honest, for Li Haitan and the rest, they felt better when fighting a battle along with their commander. Li Haitan was initially a bandit. The old Weiwu army who had fallen was in no way better than him. Although the Qingsai army was a powerful army, they had lost several battles. Therefore, their past life experience was not as exciting as compared to what happened in these few months. The Weiwu army had never lost a battle against the Black Feather army before. Moreover, they had always defeated their enemies all to pieces and had a superior position while passing through the cave. The entire Weiwu army exclaimed, this is how amazing it felt to fight. Everyone was as close as a family. They were all battlemates and had gone through thick and thin together. Even if they were told to leave, they would not leave. On the other hand, Lu Shu was worthy of the name of a true leader. However, this leader was determined to torture them with homework. It was extremely tormenting for Li Haitan. He wanted to suggest to the king to let everyone attack the Weibei Pass. After all, they had nothing to do. They were willing to do anything as long as they could avoid doing homework. At this moment, the army of the aristocrats suddenly attacked. However, they did not head to the Qinglu Mountain but went to Yunnan City, Guangliao City and Nanning City, rushing against the clock. However, when Lu Yizhao passed the message back to the army, Zhang Weiyu affirmed, the Lord of Heaven has completed his training. Lu Shu frowned, what is Wen Zaifu like? If he really wants to put the blame on the Weiwu army, we probably have to escape first. shall we head to the west region? Zhang Weiyu stared at Lu Shu in a daze. You have already annoyed the Black Feather Army in the west region and you still want to head over? Don't even think about it. If our soldiers betrayed us, the officials under the rule of the Lord of Heaven will definitely go for a cleanse of the Weiwu army. This is not about winning or losing, it is about their reputation. I am just making a casual remark. Lu Shu thought. Fortunately, he did not do it. There is no need to worry about the Lord of Heaven Wen Zaifu, said Zhang Weiyu suddenly, I have a rather good impression about him. Amongst the 4 lords of heaven, he is the only one who is determined to train and is not overly concerned about power and benefits. If he is someone who is extremely particular about politics, then Yi Xiaoming would not have been able to stay in the position as the commander for such a long time. The Lord of Heaven must have seen through his tricks but did not bother to care about him. Then should we not escape first? Asked Lu Shu curiously. At this moment, a voice mixed with laughter was heard behind Lu Shu. Where do you want to escape to? Didn't you make a great accomplishment? Why do you have to escape? Lu Shu was extremely shocked and attacked the person behind him instinctively with a tree branch. However, before the tree branch could hit the person, he had already placed his finger on the tree branch and the tree branch disintegrated. Then, he realized that the young handsome man was wearing a black ceremonial dress. It was decorated with 12 objects: dragon, sun, moon, stars, mountain, pheasant, wine vessel, algae, fire, rice grains, axe and a pattern. Lu Shu's heart sank. He had already figured out who the person was. Chapter 948, Mr. Wen. Lu Shu got goosebumps and threw the disintegrated tree branch away. He did not understand how the person managed to disintegrate the tree branch while not hurting his palm. The young man in a black ceremonial dress was standing upright but looked relaxed. He looked as if he blended into the surroundings. With a smile, he did not look out of place and his presence did not give anyone stress. Lu Shu patted the remains of the tree branch away and asked, "Who are you? Didn't you already figure out who I am?" The young man smiled and said with his hands clasped in the baggy sleeves. Don't you think that this set of clothes is mysterious? Also, I had the ability to walk behind you without getting your attention. So, who do you think I am? Lu Shu was silent for a moment. Do you really have to brag? The young man was speechless. From Wen Zaifu's distress points, plus 199. Indeed, Lu Shu was correct. He was indeed Wen Zaifu, the Lord of Heaven. However, Lu Shu did not understand why Wen Zaifu appeared here. Was it suitable for a character like the Lord of Heaven to appear in the Qinglu Mountain? To be honest, Lu Shu wanted to enter the sword hut humbly and leave after he found the way home. Yet, he saw the Lord of Heaven now. Fortunately, Lu Shu did not say that or Zhang Weiyu would refute immediately. Whether Lu Shu was humble or not, he should know it the best. However, Wen Zaifu did not look angry and was still smiling. I should have only completed my training 3 months later, but I came out earlier because the Weiwu army messed up my plans. Nevertheless, I still have a question for you. By right, the Black Feather army retreated because of the Weiwu army. Therefore, you guys should claim the credit for it. So why are you guys still escaping? At this moment, Wen Zaifu smiled even brighter. Or rather, the question should be, where can you guys escape to? Let me introduce myself. I am Wen Zaifu, the Lord of Heaven of the Northern region. However, I prefer to be addressed as something else. After that, Wen Zaifu suddenly turned and looked at Zhang Weiyu. How are you? Zhang Weiyu greeted Wen Zaifu formally. How are you, Mr. Wen? Lu Shu was stunned. Mr. Wen? It was strange to call the Lord of Heaven Mr. Wen. Wen Zaifu smiled as he saw the confusion on Lu Shu's face. Do you not know their identities? Or have you figured it out but don't dare to say it? Why? You don't seem to be a timid person. After all, you have collaborated with the gambling dens in the palace and made so much profit. Lu Shu was annoyed. However, he did not refute it when he thought about Wen Zaifu's capability. At this moment, Zhang Weiyu said, Mr. Wen was the instructor of the Imperial Dragon soldiers. Therefore, we call him Mr. Wen as a form of respect. Lu Shu gasped in shock. He had already guessed who Zhang Weiyu and the rest were. After all, Lu Yizhao did not hide anything. He only refused to mention it intentionally. However, Lu Shu definitely did not expect Wen Zaifu to be the instructor of the Imperial Dragon soldiers. That meant that he was probably the closest person to the King of Gods, or he could not possibly have become a Lord of Heaven. At this moment, Lu Shu suddenly thought about why the old King of Gods placed the other experts such as Zhang Weiyu and Lu Yizhao in the North region. However, what bothered Lu Shu the most was whether Wen Zaifu would misunderstand because Zhang Weiyu appeared beside him. However, he heard Wen Zaifu say laughingly to Zhang Weiyu, the few of you brats are finally willing to leave the town. Initially, I asked you guys to leave to help me and you guys said that you won't leave no matter what. Why did a military accident change your minds? Zhang Weiyu frowned. Don't tell me you left the Black Feather Army behind because you wanted to force us to leave the town. Wen Zaifu raised his eyebrows. Why would I do something so childish? Lu Shu had a strong premonition that Zhang Weiyu probably made the correct guess. Lu Shu started to feel that something was amiss, but he could not pinpoint the exact problem. When Zaifu shook his black ceremonial dress and said to Zhang Weiyu, I have enough soldiers for you to train. However, you guys insisted on training the Wei Wu army and wasted your energy. It is not bad for a bunch of bandits to be trained to this standard. Zhang Weiyu said calmly, Mr. Wen is good at training soldiers, why are you asking us to train them since you can do it yourself? Wen Zaifu suddenly widened his eyes. I am already the Lord of Heaven. You are asking a Lord of Heaven to train the soldiers? I can't do that, it's too embarrassing. Zhang Weiyu was speechless. This young man, Wen Zaifu looked at Lu Shu. He is. No, Zhang Weiyu shook his head and started to exchange gazes with Wen Zaifu. I don't think he is either. That person is so charismatic and it is indeed a coincidence for both of you to meet, Wen Zaifu nodded and said. Lu Shu suddenly felt that although Wen Zaifu had been in isolation, he seemed to know a lot about what was going on outside. Moreover, why was the Lord of Heaven so cocky? Was that how a Lord of Heaven should act? To be honest, Lu Shu thought that the Lord of Heaven should be scheming and have great foresight. However, thinking about it now, Wen Zaifu took a look at Lu Shu and immediately figured out what he was thinking about. He suddenly said, some people spend their whole lives trying to get to this position, of course, they are used to scheming. However, I am different. I made use of my real skills to get to this point. Do you know what is real skills? I don't negotiate with others. Lu Shu was speechless. Was it really all right for someone like Wen Zaifu to be the Lord of Heaven? Lu Shu saw this and laughed. He decided to not be involved in this situation. Then forget it, I will not escape. However, why did you, the Lord of Heaven, follow us to this side of the mountain? To give us a reward? That's right. Wen Zaifu nodded. How about giving Wei Bei Pass, Liyang Pass, Guangliao City, Nangying City, Yunnan City to you guys? Lu Shu replied, no thanks. Guarding 5 fortresses with only 5,000 people? Lu Shu was not stupid enough to do that. Wei Wu army was a united and powerful group. Once they separate, they would not be as powerful. At this moment, 12 people flew over from the north. Lu Shu saw how Wen Zaifu's expression changed and he immediately became serious. The 12 individuals knelt in front of Wen Zaifu. Congratulations for completing your training, Lord of Heaven. Were we really going to lose all 10 fortresses if I didn't complete my training? Wen Zaifu asked calmly. One of the individuals said in fear, "Now that we have regained possession of most of the fortresses, please give us another chance, Lord of Heaven." Chapter 949, Bored with Nothing to Do. The aristocrats have probably forgotten how to fight. Even their supplies were taken away by the bandits. "The longer they live, the more backward they become," said Wen Zaifu calmly. All the aristocrats looked at Lu Shu, who was beside Wen Zaifu. From Peng Haoming's distress, plus 666. From Lu Shu silently remembered their names and their faces. They were the 12 aristocrats who had the most power in the North region. He might be able to work with them in the future. When Zaifu suddenly said, "Look at what he is doing. He is the commander of the Weiwu army, not a bandit." The aristocrats were dumbfounded. They did not believe that the Lord of Heaven did not know about the details. Thus, he had said this to protect the Weiwu army. From now on, the Weiwu army would be the Weiwu army. The bandits with the slogan, "Escape poverty and make a fortune," would have absolutely nothing to do with them. "Yes, yes, yes. Lord of Heaven, you are right," said the aristocrats. "Since the 12 top aristocrats of the North region are all gathered here, so be it. The city is for you to play with. Take another 10 cities from the Black Feather Army and return them to me," said Wen Zaifu. "If you are unable to do so, you do not need to return." The aristocrats did not expect the punishment to be so heavy. They had fought towards the West region. Even if 12 aristocrat families were involved, they did not have to spend so much on war. If they had lost, they would have to suffer an even more severe punishment. Even if they won, they had to take responsibility. But they forced themselves to say, "We will respect the commands from the Lord of Heaven." Who dared to object to him? The Lord of Heaven would hit them. Typically, this Lord of Heaven was frustrated by the cheap tricks the people played. Furthermore, he focused his energy on training and did not pay much attention to governance. There were both pros and cons to this. If they made contributions, they would be rewarded handsomely. They did not have to be on the edge in fear of being investigated. The 12 aristocrats quickly came and went. When they left, one of them complained, "It's all because the 7 of you were greedy and wanted to occupy these 5 strategic passes. Now, the 5 of us have to clean up your mess." Originally, only 7 aristocrats had been involved in this. The Lord of Heaven favors the Weiwu army now. Don't provoke them. His punishment might have been severe because he wants to help the Weiwu army. Someone argued, "How could we guess the Lord of Heaven would care so much about the Weiwu army? Furthermore, since when did we provoke the Weiwu army? They were the ones who attacked first." The aristocrats were depressed. Their armies had been starving for the past half a month. Who had been provoked? Thus, just as the Black Feather Army retreated to the West region, Li Liang decided to take a breather and retire from his current position. But before he could catch his breath, the aristocrat armies had started to chase them from the North region. Li Liang felt sick. Was it so difficult for him to leave? When Zaifu waited for the aristocrats to leave before asking curiously, "Are you sure that you don't want the cities that most can only dream of?" "No," Lu Shu said in a serious tone, "Can they guard the cities, while I collect taxes?" At that moment, Zhang Weiyu suddenly said something to Lu Shu in a small voice. Lu Shu said, "We want Yunnan City." "Sure." When Zaifu nodded his head. "Then you will be given Nanging City." "No, wait. I said that I wanted Yunnan City." Lu Shu was shocked. "Were you having difficulty hearing?" When Zaifu did not bother about Lu Shu. He turned and walked away. It was as if there was an endless void behind him. He disappeared into thin air. Lu Shu was dumbfounded. What was this? Was this a special technique that Shinsong Jing possessed? The next moment, Lu Shu smiled. This method is quite effective. Has he always been so troublesome? They had discussed this 3 days ago. If the Lord of Heaven talked about giving them rewards, they would take Nanging City. But they could not directly say what they wanted. Wen Zaifu would not give them what they directly demanded for. At first, Lu Shu was puzzled. Was this to stop people from coming up with conspiracies? But Zhang Weiyu said that this was not the case. Wen Zaifu liked to tease people and see the shocked expressions of others. You said that the Lord of Heaven was your former teacher? Lu Shu asked curiously. The old king of gods must have trusted him greatly. How did he become a Lord of Heaven? Because the old king of gods was too annoyed by him, Zhang Weiyu said calmly. He no longer wanted to see him, so he made him go far away. Lu Shu was dumbstruck. This was possible? Zhang Weiyu said, in the past, our hiding place in the village had never been discovered by the Black Feather Army. But this time, it is different. It is as if the Black Feather Army had come to where we were hiding. I suspect that he intentionally exposed our hiding place and forced us to appear. Does he want to kill you? Lu Shu asked with some doubt. With Wen Zaifu's earlier behavior and Zhang Weiyu's words, Zhang Weiyu's guess was not impossible. He felt that we have suffered too much and does not want us to die in the fields. Zhang Weiyu sighed. I even suspect that his announcement of isolation is fake. It is possible that he has always been observing this war. If not, why would he pay attention to what is happening outside? Lu Shu thought about it. If this was truly the case, then all the actions of the aristocrats had been seen by the Lord of Heaven. Wen Zaifu might have been bored with nothing to do and wanted to reorganize them. If one had lived for a long time, they would be bored without something to do. They would come up with some strange hobby. If not, how would they pass the time? But Lu Shu felt that something was wrong as Lu Yizhao had misunderstood his identity. Thus, he was worried that Wen Zaifu would think about the same thing. Furthermore, no one was sure whether Wen Zaifu was an enemy or an ally. But Zhang Weiyu's explanation caused Wen Zaifu to continue with the flow. It was as if everything was far too simple. Lu Shu was slightly melancholic. He had been lying low. How did he get involved with the Lord of Heaven? Just as the Lord of Heaven had left, a slave from an aristocrat came. The same people who had come before had come again. When they saw Lu Shu, they smiled and said, "Congratulations on obtaining Nanging City. My master has prepared a gift for you. We hope that we will be able to work together in the future and forget about our past conflicts." Lu Shu glanced at them. The 12 aristocrats had actually presented 1,000,000 notes as a gift. Earlier, Lu Shu had asked Lu Yizhao and Li Haitan to handle the slaves. Zhang Weiyu was worried that Lu Shu would destroy the relationship between the Weiwu army and the aristocrats once again. After all, it was better to have more friends than enemies. But before he could advise Lu Shu, he saw Lu Shu shake the slave's hand sincerely. "Go back and tell your masters that from now on, we are brothers." Brothers. Chapter 950, Monopolize Business. When the slaves heard the word brother, they had complex feelings. The commander of the Weiwu army and the great lord of the Qinglu Mountain was an extremely unique individual. One could not help but look at him. In reality, everyone already knew that he loved money to death. But when they saw that Wen Zaifu had given the Weiwu army Nanging City, they were all smiles. For many years, Nanging City had become an essential city when the Black Feather Army fought in the north region. Thus, if the Black Feather Army came to attack again, the Weiwu army would be the first to be attacked. But some felt that it was strategic for Wen Zaifu to place the Weiwu army in Nanging City. In the future, the Black Feather Army might no longer come back. But Lu Shu did not think about this. If the Black Feather Army did not come, he could invite them. After all, he could still do business with them, right? When the Black Feather Army came again, the Weiwu army would immediately hide in the Qinglu Mountain. They would not care even if you committed a mass massacre outside. He would wait to collect the remains afterwards. At that moment, someone said, "My master congratulates you on obtaining Nanging City. He hopes that there will be amiable relations between us." Suddenly, someone thought of something. If 1,000,000 notes was enough to become brothers with the commander of the Weiwu army, then, he suddenly had a bold idea. One of the slaves said, "Great commander, what if my master is willing to give you 5,000,000 notes?" Lu Shu paused for 2 seconds. "Then he can take me as his adoptive father." The slave was dumbfounded. "No, wait. There was something wrong with your logic. Why should he accept you as his adoptive father? So as long as they gave enough money, they could take him as their father?" From Li Zong's Distress, plus 666. From How About It? Lu Shu laughed cheerily. "Are you interested?" The slave was silent. "We don't have any money. We've had some problems recently with money transfer." Lu Shu seemed slightly disappointed. "Oh. Then you can come back when you have the money." The slaves hurriedly thanked Lu Shu. They could not wait any longer here. The longer they waited, the worse it was for their hearts. After the slaves left, Lu Shu looked at Lu Yizhao. "So we've returned to your territory." But Lu Yizhao caused Lu Shu to have complex feelings. "Everything under the heavens belongs to the king. Great Lord, this is your territory." Lu Shu had been thinking. What would happen if they knew about the truth? Would they attack him in their rage? But the problem was, there was no use for him to explain the truth. He led the Weiwu army to advance towards Nanging City that night and accepted the rights as the head of the city. When Lu Shu thought about becoming the head of a city, he was slightly excited. This meant that he had his own territory, right? The Qinglu Mountain could not quite be considered his. Lu Shu had just wanted to blend in with the soldiers of the Weiwu army and be chosen for the sword hut selections. How had he become the head of a city? He had switched from handling soap to handling people. On the way to Nanging City, Zhang Weiyu asked curiously, "What are you planning to do in Nanging City?" "Make soap," said Lu Shu, as if it was a natural thing to do. Zhang Weiyu could not understand. How much money was he able to make from selling soap? Their current income was 10,000,000 notes. But the problem was, he had spent all that income on armor for the Weiwu army, right? Furthermore, who said that selling soap generated less profit than collaborating with others? To be honest, collaborations were only restricted to the palace. There was no internet in the Luniverse. Not everyone could place bets. Lu Shu had realized early on that most of the commoners could not enter gambling dens. Only those who had extra money would do so. But soap was different. Commoners needed soap. Was there no future for commodities? Their future was bright. Just last year, the biggest commodities company on Earth had an annual revenue of $500 billion. This was under the circumstance that they had not monopolized the market. If they had done so, their annual revenue might have reached $1 trillion. Of course, Lu Shu did not dream of earning so much money, nor was he capable of doing so. It would be fine as long as he was able to bring back magical stone, magical weapons, techniques, and local specialties. He had gradually formed feelings towards the Weiwu army as well. It was good to leave a retreat route for them when he left. Who did not want to have more money? The civilians in Nanging City were worried that the new head of the city would exploit them. After all, when Lu Yizhao was around, he had not exploited the commoners, but everyone knew how the other heads of cities were. The nearby Weiwu army had exploited Yun and City for many years. And this time, the Weiwu army was here to occupy Nanging City. Typically, armies were stationed outside cities, but that was because they had many people. Since the Weiwu army only had 5,000 people, Lu Shu let them stay in the city. Thus, the civilians in Nanging City realized that the first thing that the Weiwu army did after arriving was to buy a piece of land. Then, they built a few dozen 3-story buildings and constructed a military camp. This was the first time that an army had occupied Nanging City. The civilians were on tenterhooks. But after 1 month, there were no incidents where the Weiwu army disturbed the civilians. Furthermore, some said that the previous head of Nanging City was in the Weiwu army. Some also saw the soldiers from the Qingxai army. Slowly, everyone realized that the Weiwu army was not as terrible as they had expected. Then, the Weiwu army opened a factory. The head of the city started to develop policies and give out subsidies for planting peanuts. He also started to purchase minerals, recruit factory workers, and produced soap. The civilians in Nanging City were dumbfounded by these dazzling actions. What were they up to? Then, they saw many trade caravans arrive in Nanging City. They took away with them boxes of intricate soap. These trade caravans were connections that Lu Shu had already established. They were the families behind the Songji gambling den and the Liji gambling den. Everyone was willing to make connections with the Weiwu army, as selling soap was a very lucrative system. Just as the Weiwu army gave up on fighting and started to produce soap, the palace was short on soap. The upper-class ladies grabbed their greasy heads and complained every day. Why had such a good thing like soap disappeared? Lu Shu regretted that he had not produced shampoo. It would have become a great business opportunity, right? In the past, no one cared whether their hair was greasy. But after they had enjoyed being clean, it was different. When soap reappeared in the palace, many people were shocked. The Weiwu army had invented soap? They were adept at fighting, right? How were they able to produce soap? What kind of army was this? At that moment, the sword hut selection had finally begun. Lu Shu did not bring anyone else along with him. He simply embarked north with Lu Xiaoyu. No one outside knew that the commander of the Weiwu army had left Nanging City.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, man, we just putting on the show. Try to look to the heavens.